Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So in today's tutorial we're going to begin a new series on JavaScript Node.js library. So we're going to be learning backend development with Node.js. So we're going to go over the basics, and at the end of this series we're going to go ahead and build a simple project. So this is going to be a a whole course on JavaScript using Node.js. So we're going to be building backend applications using Node.js and how to build simple CRUD APIs and other stuff like that. So at the end of this tutorial, at the end of this series rather, we're going to build a simple project using MongoDB and then Node.js, which is going to build a simple API using Node.js. You're going to learn all the CRUD functionality and stuff like that. So let's get started. So we're going to do in this tutorial is get ourselves familiar with what Node.js basically is and what backend development basically is. So we're going to introduce ourselves to backend development. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is to learn front-end development, right? And I've made a series of courses on front-end development using React, HTML and CSS and other stuff like that. So front-end development basically denotes the interface that a web user interacts with, right? And this is mostly powered by HTML, CSS and JavaScript. But sometimes, right, you're working with an application and you're making maybe you're using a fetch to make a request to the back end, right? So that's what we call back-end development. But in this case, you're going to go front-end development. Is just basically deals with what the user is able to see, and those people who do front-end development, they are called front-end engineers or front-end developers, right? People who use React, Angular, Vue and other stuff like that. These are all front-end applications, right? So front-end is what the user sees and is powered by HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So what the user sees in the browser is the front end, right? And what happens in the background is what we call the back end. So the back end denotes all that goes behind the scenes that the user doesn't see, but that makes the user interaction with the web application possible. So this includes all the server-side logic. The server-side applications are written in different languages such as like Python. For example, we have looked at how to create APIs in FastAPI. We have looked at how to create APIs in nodes also using Node.js, Node Express. It can also be written in Java, PHP using Laravel, ASP.NET, Ruby, and I've covered Ruby and Ruby also. You can also go over Ruby on Rails. You can also use to build back-end applications. So people who build back-end applications, these are called back-end developers, and they focus on building the back-end application that the front end talks to in order to make the interaction between the user and the server and the back-end services like databases and other stuff like that. So anything that involves the logic behind the website that the user does not necessarily see is known as the back end, when what the user sees and interacts with is what is called the front end, right? So let's go over what a full stack development is. So you probably heard the word full stack development and you're wondering, okay, what's full stack development? Well, full stack development is a combination of both front end development and back end development, because if you just build an API, right, the user can interact with the API, right? So what you basically do is build a front end application using React, Angular or Vue, and that the user is able to interact with the API using the front end application. So the combination of the front end and the back end, right, the server side logic and what the user sees or the user interface is what we call a full stack development. So and a person who does full stack development is known as a full stack engineer, which combines both front end and back end. So you need to have skills of server side development in languages like Python, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails, PHP and other back end ASP.NET and other services. And then you need to also know front end like React, Node.js, HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, Material UI, and all other front end stuff. So a combination of the both is what is called a full stack development, and a person who does full stack development is known as a full stack developer. So a full stack combines both of the back end and the front end. So the display layout, the CSS, the JavaScript, the user interface, that's all the front end. And the back end deals with the function, the logic, the databases, the server communications, and other stuff like that, JWT generation and other stuff like that. That is all handled by the back end. So a combination of the two, front end and back end, makes a full stack. Okay, so makes you a full stack developer. So just to understand what a full stack is, here we have an application right here. Maybe this could be a mobile app, a website, or anything like that. And we also have the backend. The backend includes the server, which could be written in PHP, ASP.NET, Java, Python, Node.js, which we're going to cover in this course. And also have the which talks to, so the server talks to the database to fetch data from the database, and then returns the request to the front end. So the front end makes a request to the server. The server is able to understand the request, like which method to use. So it's a get method, a post method, whether the user wants to retrieve something, wants to store something, wants to delete something on the database and stuff like that. So the server understands all that, and it talks to the database, so the server can talk to the database. And there's why we need a server between the front end and the back end to create the front end in the database, is that you can take database information like SQL objects and transfer them over HTTP, right? So you need to put them in a format that can be transferred over HTTP, and that is typically JSON. So that's what the work of a server. A server does that, translate the database information into a format that can be transferred over the network. So it gets transferred over the network to the front end. So in the front end you receive JSON, and you're able to pass that JSON to the front end user, right? And if you want to communicate back to the back end, the front end sends information that the server can understand. The server decodes that information, and if it needs to interact with the database, it does get the data, put in a format that can be transferred over HTTPS or HTTP, and then goes to the front end, and the front end is able to render that to the user. So a combination of the both back end and the front end is what is called a full stack. And the person who does full stack development is known as a full stack engineer. So let's go at introduction to framework. So in programming, most of the times you have very basic stuff like that you want to do, right? And most of the time if you're writing programs, you repeat the basic stuff over and over and over again. This can become very tedious and boring, and also makes your code very robust. And if you want to make a bit of change, you have to change a lot of code, since you're writing the same things over and over again. So writing and repetition of code is not a preferred thing in software development. Instead of always repeating the same basic stuff over and over again, programmers have made all this basic stuff together into a single block, and has all the basic setup, and this is called a framework. So whenever you combine all the basic stuff into one library, is called this a framework, and that's what we're going to be covering. And in this course of backend development, sometimes you go over the basic stuff over and over again. So to simplify things, you're going to be using a backend for all those activities. So backend does not only help us to avoid repetition of code, it also helps us to structure our program properly, so that our program structure is more modular in a manner. This helps increase readability and understanding between different programmers, since we all follow the same standards and modularization of our code, modularization architecture. For example, we have some architectures like the MVC architecture, which stands for model, view, and control. You're going to cover all of that in this tutorial. So the MVC architecture is frameworks helps to achieve the MVC architecture. So introduction to frameworks that for backend development, we have Django REST framework, and I've covered it in my tutorial in my channel. The link, you can find the link in the description. Go to my channel's main page, and you'll be able to find a course on Django REST framework. We also went over, there's also Node.js, so Node Express rather. So Node Express is what we'll be covering in this tutorial, and we'll learn all the basics of Node Express. Okay, we also have Flask RESTful, and which is another Python library that is used to build backend services using Python. So I also have this tutorial on this on my channel, so feel free to check that out. And you also have Laravel. Laravel is a PHP library framework that is used to build backend services, APIs and stuff like that. We also have Ruby on Rails, which comes from the language Ruby. If you know Ruby, I have an introduction to Ruby on my channel, so feel free to check that out. So Ruby on Rails is what is used to build backend services, and I think it was originally also used to build the Twitter application. So we also have FastAPI, and FastAPI, I have gone over a lot of tutorials on FastAPI on my channel, and FastAPI is from a Python library that is used to build modern APIs, and is very, very fast. So if you want to check FastAPI, I have a lot of tutorials on FastAPI on my channel, so feel free to go ahead and do that. So now that you have gone over what frameworks are and how to use these frameworks and different frameworks that we can use to build backend services, let's go into and introduce ourselves to Node.js, because Node.js is what we'll be covering in this series. So JavaScript as a programming language was designed to run on the browser, right, and built only web applications. It wasn't designed to run outside the web browser. So JavaScript was designed to run solely on the web browser. This means it was impossible to use JavaScript outside outside of the browser. You couldn't choose JavaScript outside of the browser. This was until Node.js came along, and with Node.js JavaScript runtime, you are now able to run JavaScript outside of the browser on your local machine. So with Node.js, you can be able to run JavaScript anywhere on your local machine without necessarily having to use or write JavaScript inside of the browser, and that makes JavaScript really just more versatile, just like any other language like Python, Python, Ruby, PHP, and other language that can run outside of the browser. So this enables us to build back-end applications using using JavaScript to facilitate the ability to run off browser. Node.js has added functionality to enable it to carry out operations outside of the browser, such as reading files, writing to files, making HTTP connections, which help us to build web backend services, listening on specific ports, and so on, just like any other language like Python, Ruby, PHP, and other stuff like that, ASP.NET. So this helps JavaScript to be able to run on the browser and to do everything, basically things such as creating a HTTP connection, creating a server, listening to specific ports, writing to files, reading from files, and other information just like that, interacting with the computer basically. So that makes JavaScript more usable, more user friendly, and more usable outside of the browser, and that's what Node.js came to solve. So let's go to ourselves introduction to Node.js. So you might hear that Node.js is event driven. So what does the Node.js being event driven means? So Node.js is an acronym that's asynchronous event driven JavaScript runtime. So a JavaScript runtime means that it runs outside of the browser, right? So this basically means the order of sequences in your code execution is not predefined. JavaScript being Node.js being event driven, meaning that it is asynchronous, right? Asynchronous means that it is not the ordering of execution of function is not predefined. The execution of functions rather is event driven, meaning that the function is executed based on a certain action, right? That is what is meant by asynchronous, right? So and if you know what asynchronous programming is, I have an introduction to multiprocessing computers and using asynchronous programming, and you can check that out on my YouTube page. Okay, so asynchronous programming means that the order of functions, right? There's no predefined order, meaning that a function is run based on a certain event, and that's what is meant by JavaScript is event driven. Okay, so I hope you guys get that point. So to get started with Node.js, the first thing we need to do is to install Node.js. So you can just click on this and go to nodejs.org/en/downloads. Okay, so you can click on go to Node.js. So let me just exit out of this presentation for now. So I'm in my browser right here, so you can just go to Node.js, and in here you can go to nodejs.org, and then /English, which is en/download, and then from there you can be able to download and install Node.js on your machine. I'm not going to go over the steps to download and install Node.js. It's quite straightforward, so I'm going to leave that to you guys to go ahead and install Node.js. And once you have Node.js installed, you can go ahead and open up your terminal, and you can simply do node --, version, and this should return to the version of Node that you're running. I'm running a bit older version of Node, which is Node 14.17.3. Currently I think it's 16.14.0, but I'm running 14.1.7. but feel free to follow along. Even if you have the latest one, nothing is going to go wrong for execution. So but if I advise you to get 14.1.7.3 so you can follow along without any errors. Okay, so once we have that done, so let's go ahead and see what what you can also do. And you can also run Node inside of the terminal. So let's go ahead and see how you can do that. So you can simply type in here Node and then press enter. So here you can just simply write Node in the terminal, and that's basically JavaScript outside of the browser, right? So you can just do const, you can say let's say message msg, and this is going to be hello world, just like this. I can just go ahead and print msg, and you can just return to me hello world. So I can simply go ahead and run JavaScript outside of the browser, because mainly JavaScript is run inside of the browser, but now I'm running JavaScript outside of the browser. So if I go into my browser and then I try to create a new, let me just try to go a new window, and let me try to go and see if I can get inspect, go to inspect, and in here I can go to console, and then I can simply do the same. I can do console const msg, and this is going to be hello world, So if I do that and I simply go ahead and print I can just say console.log .log, and I can just see msg just like that, and I can simply log the information, which is just hello world right here. So I hope you guys can see. Let me just zoom in a bit. So it's what I have done so far. I just did a message and I simply printed out the message, the same thing we have done in the terminal right here. So with Node.js you're able to run JavaScript outside of the browser, because this is inside of the browser, and with the help of Node.js I'm able to do the same logic but outside of the browser, and that's the whole main point of Node.js. So this is just a quick introduction to Node.js. In the next tutorial we'll begin learning Node.js and create a simple programs and modules using Node.js. So guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial so far, don't forget to like, to share, and to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Since most of you guys who watch my channel are not actually subscribed, so subscribing to my YouTube channel will be of great help to me. So kindly go ahead and hit the subscription button, and see you in the next one. Again, to exit out of this, you just have to press Ctrl twice, and that will exit out of your Node interpreter. So once I have that done, that's all for this tutorial. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Keep safe.